video capture card is not here yet. I can't play any games. So instead, why don't we watch some YouTube videos? This video doesn't go to 1080, so I'm sorry for the quality, but how about we watch this? Do a little bit of commentary on this event that happened recently, because I've seen bits and pieces off of TikTok, and what occurred is nonstop, like, word vomit out of his mouth, and it's funny not funny, haha, but it's like, everybody in the room was laughing at him, which is, that's how it should be. Without further ado.
As journalists, we use opportunities like these.
I love how they use gorillas as an intro. I noticed that when I watched a clip earlier, and I was just like, I don't know why I was entertained by it.
You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort to vote for you.
He has a
Why should
collection.
Black voters trust you?
I forget the guy that he had dinner with, but I do remember when that happened, and I think I made a video about it on TikTok. But he had dinner with a white supremacist who collects, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word, the bad group from World War II, memorabilia. Like, he has a copy of that book that I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, so I'm not going to say the book name. But, yeah, he has a copy of that. And his excuse, he's like a billionaire or millionaire or something like that, and, like, horrifically rich. And they had dinner together. And, like, I'm genuinely curious what his supporters would say about it, because we all know that none of them are actually thinking. None of them are using critical thinking skills. Otherwise, they wouldn't have voted for him. He did have dinner with a white supremacist.
After you have used language like that.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question.
Because it's a
You don't
girl.
even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a
He
terrible
doesn't
network.
like when girls give him
And
tough questions.
I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina.
He's done so well in the opportunity zone, and yet he wants to get rid of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He wants to get rid of that being taught in schools, universities, the workplace. But he's given plenty of opportunities to the black population.
Programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. Done so much, and and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala.
This fish that I made from Michigan, Bay Mills, Michigan, Upper Peninsula, there's this fish place. I have to talk about it because it's so delicious. My grandparents go up there all the time, and we go on vacation up there all the time, because if you've ever been to the UP, you know why. And yeah, Bay Mills. has this little, not really, but like a pretty old fish monger. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, they sell fish. They go out there in the morning. The fish used to be alive that morning at 6 a.m. or probably more like 3 a.m. And then, you know, you can cook it for dinner. It is the best whitefish I've ever had. If you are in the UP or anywhere where, if you're thinking about going somewhere, Bay Mills, UP, Michigan, visit.
I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population
that guy's
since
really
Abraham Lincoln.
That's my answer. Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act? Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American.
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a definition then. Would you give me a definition of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question.
No,
he's a man-child.
Define it for me, if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she...
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong. I haven't Googled it. It's worth a Google. But I could have sworn that when Obama was president, there was this whole talk about, around Republicans where he wasn't black, or he wasn't black enough to be considered black. I'm pretty sure that was a thing that the Republican Party did do. So this is nothing new, because what they're trying to do is put like a wedge in between the black community and Kamala Harris, which isn't going to happen.
She's black.
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that
I think somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire?
This lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well, you told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided.
Observation. I could be wrong. I don't know who these women are, but their suits are very coordinated. So, I'm curious, is she a Democrat and she's a Republican and Libertarian? I don't know. I don't actually know the color for Libertarian. I don't know. I'm just
along the lines of race,
either way,
along the lines of gender.
They look great.
What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from
no kidding.
the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job.
Is that what people are talking about? I've heard that in TikToks. People are talking about like what a black job is. This is where it comes from? Okay. We all know what he meant by that. He was being racist, because he equates immigrants and the black population to servant jobs, like as in serving you, as in like being, let's see, janitors, nannies, things of that nature, things that are below him. That's what he means, but he knows he can't say that, so he's quickly backtracking.
All
right.
And
Mr. President,
they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that.
People who are undocumented, it's something that just I notice is removed from the conversation. They're undocumented people. They're not illegal aliens. They're not here to destroy America. They're not here to do anything but live, because they're people like you and me who need to live somewhere else. That's it. They aren't creatures with claws and fangs, and they aren't gonna steal your job.
From mental institutions, from prisons, from jails, they're gang members. And
you know what would make a whole bunch of jobs is if large corporations, first, is if the United States passed legislation that would make it so that large corporations have to work ethically, have to have everything sourced ethically. And what I mean by that is, not only is it made in America, as in like factories, which would make a bunch of jobs for people of the working class. Simple as that. We need legislation to make that happen. But the problem is, large corporations, the reason the Republicans make it seem like it's a working class issue, when in reality it is not a working class issue in the least. Excuse me. It's not a working class issue. It can be solved by creating legislation, passing a bill that makes it so that large corporations have to source ethically, pay a decent wage if they are going to export, or rather import, their products from other countries where it is made. So, for example, what's another country? Okay, India, for example. Let's talk about the Congo instead. Let's talk about Congo. If you don't have to pay people and you can use slavery, and you're a large corporation, and you need cobalt and a bunch of other materials, I can't think of the word. You know what I mean. Other metals and elements. You're most likely going to go with the one that's cheapest. The one that's cheapest is the one that's most unethical. Large corporations have made a killing on that because they get to make a whole bunch of money. We, as in the working class people in the US, don't have jobs because big corporations would rather use slave labor and rather use it is slave labor. Even if you do get paid like a fraction of a cent, of a US cent, that's slavery, because that is putting you in a position where you can either earn a little or nothing. That's slavery.
In other countries.
So, just saying, it's an American-made issue. There is no immigration crisis. There is a job crisis because Congress, the president tomorrow could sign a piece of legislation and use an executive order to make large corporations like this, like Samsung. I have a Samsung. Ever since I learned that cobalt and other materials materials are sourced from the Congo, where slave labor is used, where women are assaulted and kids are assaulted. I can't really look at this the same. I look at all of my technology that I have, and I'm like, somebody suffered for me to have that. And so having it be, it's not a working class issue. It is a legislative issue. And it should be treated as such instead of going around and around and around and around every single time it's time for an election, because that's what happens.
Are setting loose their prisoners, they're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
True.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts, and this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now. The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it.
How to not answer a question in one step.
Is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class.
Okay, and then he goes off.
Inflation is a disaster.
He goes off, and he's talking about inflation, when it's not. Again, it's a man-made issue. There is no major famine. There is no major drought in any particular area. We get our produce and our food stuffs from a lot of different places in the United States. We get, I guess, there was, at the very beginning, I think, of the Ukrainian-Russia war, there was a problem with getting wheat because we import a lot, like a big percentage of wheat from Ukraine. But we are not in a famine crisis situation. There is no reason why food needs to be this expensive, that people need to put it on a credit card. People are putting food on credit cards because they can't pay for food. That is a bad sign.
Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying the black community probably as much or more than any.
What's your plan?
And instead of saying, let's keep going, and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight, a prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing well. You say, let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him, and now we have to steer toward him. But ultimately it's the same because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders.
He was just very honest there for a second. So I'm going to highlight what he just said. They geared their entire campaign, his campaign, the Trump campaign, they geared it towards Biden, towards calling him, incompetent, which he is, saying, he's too old, which this fella right here is only a couple years younger than Joe Biden. I'll remind you all. The only reason why he doesn't look like a ghost is because he gets his skin spray painted orange.
Borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient heating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're
That little point, passive aggressive.
absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the black worker, the black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
President, can I ask you another question
Yes.
that is also impacting Black Americans?
And that's very clear now.
My cat wants to eat my food.
I'm sorry?
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot.
Sonia Massey is incredibly tragic. Incredibly tragic. It should not have happened. And the fact that this man is about to say that he has no idea what happened, hasn't heard about her, just kind of points out how little he cares to interact with everyday life.
The other day.
Because this is everyday life for the black community and for other people of color.
In her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
If you are unaware somehow about who Sonia Massey was, she was a woman who called the police because somebody was outside, or she assumed, or not assumed, she thought somebody was outside her house prowling around, and so she called the police for help. She asked for help, and that cost her her life because 2 officers came into her house. At first they went around the property, found nothing, found nobody. Officer, whom I don't know the name of, I don't remember, was he knew what he was going to do. He knew that he was going to do something. That's my personal opinion, because, hasn't been proven in court yet, whatever. But my personal opinion is that the moment he stepped in her door, he knew what he was going to do. Whether it was to murder her or do something else, do anything else where she would inevitably be harmed, I think that that's basically what he was doing. Sonia Massey, the officer told her to walk over to the stove to take care of a pot of water that was boiling, and she did that. She walked over, took care of it, and then she said, the officer said something, and then she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." She didn't have a weapon. She was in her nightgown, in her house, in the middle of the night. So this officer heard her say that, pulls out his weapon, and says, "I'm going to shoot you," and then proceeded to shoot her dead. And then proceeded afterwards to tell the other officer that was with him in the background, who did nothing to help, to calm the situation down. He was like, "I'm going to go get my med kit." And then the other officer was like, you can get your med kit, but that was a headshot. So that's who Sonia Massey was. She was a mother of 2, and she needed help, and it cost her life.
Right?
Yeah, well, police.
And that we need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need.
This shooting was perpetrated by a police officer.
To do back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So he didn't
Can you
pay
get a
any
little more
attention to
specific
it.
back to the immunity question?
People are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted or made a mistake, an innocent mistake, there's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made
Shooting somebody in the head and saying seconds before, I'm going to shoot you in the head, is not an innocent mistake.
an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine
You
an
go
innocent
after
mistake?
somebody and it's a very close call.
So I want to follow up really quickly. Reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of 2 people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case. And I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't, because he wasn't president at the time. And he had 50 years worth of documents. And they ruled that he.
To my knowledge, Trump was not president when it came out that he had done the things, which was take a bunch of documents home. This whole situation was in his bathroom in Mar-a-Lago, I believe. It doesn't really matter where the location is because it was a private residence, but this looks like my grandfather's bathroom back in the early 2000s. This is his bathroom. This is literally what it used to look like. Only it wasn't boxes of intelligence information and other things that are crucial to us, I don't know, having some security with our information. His was just like stuff. But this is... Anyway, back to the video.
Sir,
I have
if you
a
don't mind, I'd
hostile
love
judge.
we have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different
No,
topics.
excuse
if
you.
we
You're the
can.
one that held me up for 35 minutes, just so you understand.
If we can move on now to the state of the race, sir, I want to get back to the campaign. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made.
What they're saying about people not having children, that's the Heritage Foundation, and that is the Christian push to that is like the only reason why we exist on this earth is to have kids and multiply, because the Bible told them that that's what they were for. Or rather, the church told them, and they wrote it down in the Bible because the Bible's gone through many a change throughout the years. J.D. Vance basically said that if you don't have kids in this country, if you don't have kids, you have no stake in this country, and you have no stake in the future. I'm right here. I'm right here. I think I have a stake because I live here. Most of us live here. It doesn't matter if you have children. That, I mean, yes, maybe that gives you a little bit more of a stake in the country's future. You might feel that way, or you might not feel that way. But it certainly doesn't make you worthless.
Know this, he is very family oriented, and
No
he thinks
kidding.
family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families, I know people with great families, I know people with very troubled families, and I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
But he's not just talking
Excuse
about
me.
families here.
And
He also
some of
says
those
that people that don't have children. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that...
Wouldn't it be a wild thing if all of the Christians, all of the white Christians, white cis Christians with a bajillion children, got more votes than the average person? Where do you think that would lead us?
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. Why did you choose J.D. Vance? Why did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too. I know everybody out there can, but it's hard.
I'll tell you why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room, but you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. Like, I respect you.
If you don't know, if you don't know anything about J.D. Vance, let me fill you in. Handpicked by the Heritage Foundation. He was, in fact, he is, how do I explain this? He fucked a couch. I don't know how else to word that, because that is what happened. And he wrote that in a book. He wrote that. He wrote that down in Hillbilly Elegy, edition 1, and it went to publish, and it was sold. People have this book where he details doing unspeakable things to his couch. I have not read it, and I don't want to. But yeah, handpicked by the Heritage Foundation, did stuff to his couch.
He, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what J.D. Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the
But I think it's
they're
about
allowing
freedom,
the death of a baby after the baby is born based on...
How is that done? How's that done, though? Because that's not an abortion, that's murder. Because it's already come out. It's living. Let me make this very clear. What he just said isn't happening. Because nobody carries till the 9th month and goes, you know what? I think I'm good. Nobody is going through 9 months of that. What happens and why it's important to allow medical care to people who have carried up until that point is because medical emergencies happen. And it is the most horrible thing in the world for whoever is carrying that kid. Because, it's terrible. The thought that you're almost there, you're almost to the finish line, and then something happens. And unfortunately, they have to remove, the no longer living fetus. And that is not an abortion. So what they've done is they have bastardized what it actually is, and they've turned it into this big old monster, and they've convinced people that that's what it is, that they're doing abortions up until that point, which is not true. It's not true.
But they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby.
Let me do a quick Google. Okay. Having done research, that is an entirely misconstrued way of talking about a quote that the ex-governor of Virginia said in a, like right here, 2019 radio interview. He was given a hypothetical, saying that if a mother was, let's see, let me read it. Given a hypothetical example of what could happen if a mother whose fetus had severe deformities or wasn't otherwise viable requested an abortion while in labor. His comment came in response to a question about whether he supported state legislation that would have loosened restrictions on abortions later in pregnancy. His quote was, quote, "If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, and the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother." So that is basically talking about the very, very disheartening situation of a fetus not being viable after it's been born. Those things do happen, and it is the saddest thing in the world for a family to be so excited for all these months and then find out after or during a delivery that that baby isn't viable. What we're basically talking about is palliative care or a type of end-of-life care. That is what he was talking about, the governor. That's what he was talking about. What Donald is saying is bastardizing his words. That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about just slapping them on a table and just calling it a day.
That's a radical, horrible position. And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people don't.
Thank you.
Nobody wants
Can
that.
I just pivot really quickly to another question? You're an active man. We see you golfing all the time. But if
That's
you,
about
if
as
you
active
win,
as he gets.
You'll still be president at 82, which is older than Biden is right now.
But
This
not
means
mentally.
82?
Look, mentally.
I knew he was old. I didn't know he
Here's the
was that
question.
old.
He shot.
Old does not equal wisdom.
Stepping down if you felt that your health was declining.
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated
Oh my
me.
goodness.
Pointing passive-aggressively.
And I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. That wasn't
As if
a
we
question.
haven't
I
been
repeated
in the
your
room
statement, actually.
and listened
You
to her
said you
ask
would.
a question.
You would.
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought
down.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it.
Didn't he
People
say that the
it's
test
not
was hard?
constitutional. I would like to have something passed
It's
where
not
you can do it.
about
I
that.
think we should know. I mean, I've watched
If
what's
it's hard,
happened in the last couple of years
if
under
that
this
test is
gentleman,
hard,
and our country
we
is
maybe
a
need
mess.
to
We have
reevaluate
inflation. We have
some things.
the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. What he has done to our country, and her too, what they've done to our country, she has been a horrible vice president. She's considered.
Did he just talk about Afghanistan when it was Iraq? Did I hear that right? Hang on. Let me go back.
We have the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country.
Iraq? Is that where we pulled out? Where did we go? What happened? Let me look it up. Okay, I did a little Google. He means Iraq. He doesn't mean Afghanistan. To my knowledge, and listen, a lot of things have happened this year, and last year, and the year before. A lot of things have happened, okay? It's all kind of blurring together, but I don't remember anything happening with Afghanistan. What came up for me when I Googled was Iraq, was when we pulled out there, which he didn't say the right country. I mean, it's kind of important. If you're going to be... Okay, hang on. Forgetting a name of a country, when you're the president or the ex-president, the average person, if the average person were to forget, at least here in the United States, I wouldn't be surprised. But the president of the United States forgetting the name of a country, and he's trying to say how embarrassing it was for us to do this, but he can't remember the name of the country. Okay, all right.
But would you consider taking the cognitive test?
Mr. President,
I would love to
And
do
make
it.
it public?
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr. President, how do you intend to...
I suggested, Harris, that let's take one. Now, I'd do it with her, too. I would do it with her also. You know what?
Like
She
in the
failed her
same
law
room, like in a
exam. She
classroom?
didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass
She
the
did
cognitive
pass her
test.
law exam.
Mr. President,
Are you saying she wouldn't pass? Just to be clear,
I'm just giving you the fact.
to be clear, you don't think
I'm
Harris...
just
How do you
giving the
intend,
fact.
and
She didn't
look,
pass her
She did.
bar exam.
She didn't pass
and
it the first
think
time.
She would
She
pass
passed
and
it
she didn't think she
the
was
next
going to
time.
have it pass it. And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it. I
She
guess
did pass it.
there's a-
Mr. President, I would love to ask you about January 6th. You called yourself the candidate of law and order. Assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red.
Is he talking about the people who came to protest the genocide in Gaza? There's a difference between property damage and rioting and breaking shit and doing all of that. What they were doing was civil disobedience. What they were doing was protesting a genocide. Repeat after me. Genocide. That's what it is.
Paint, red spray paint, that will never actually come off, especially in the limestone. It will never actually build up.
Gasp.
All about this stuff.
Oh, the monuments. They're never going to be clean again. Not true.
It'll never, you'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our...
Listen, get me some of that spray paint, because I have a couple things around my house that I need to paint. And if this lasts as long as Roman concrete, I think I need to buy that. Tell me the brand.
government.
Would you pardon
What's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You
If
would
they're
pardon
innocent-
those-
If they're innocent, I would pardon them. Well, they
You would
shot.
pardon those? You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that. But people died in Seattle.
Nobody died that day? Okay. I think he's confused. Because a woman was shot in the neck because she was trying to get at the vice president. She was trying to get him. She was literally crawling in a window. She was gonna get him. No wonder Pence has completely abandoned him in politics, because he almost inadvertently had him killed. So no, that's not true. People did die on January 6th. She died, number one, but other people did die too.
Nobody died, but people died in
140
Minneapolis.
officers
You know,
were-
people
That's a
died
lie.
in Minneapolis.
That day.
And nothing happens, and nobody ever talks, and nothing happens to those people. What about the
It's fun
cops
little
that
nicknames.
were, and I'm all for the police, as you know.
All for the police, literally a couple days after Sonia Massey's murder. Wild thing to say.
You have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C., they were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying, they were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them.
Republicans are more upset with property damage For instance, taking down Confederate statues that uplift Confederate generals who wanted to own people. They're more upset about taking those down than they are about gun crime. Literally. I mean, that's a real issue. That's something real. Somebody spray painting a statue, not really on my top 10 list of priorities.
What do you do on day one if you win? What's your first thing?
What do? I close the border. And I do two things, because I can do a lot of things simultaneously.
Become an autocracy.
I close the border. We don't want people coming. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have
Day
to
one.
be vetted. They have to
That
be
is the
checked.
plan,
They
by
have
the
to
way.
come in legally. I want people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked.
I want people to come into our country, but not from the majority people of color countries. Only the white countries. We have 2 borders. We have 2. And if you ever have doubts about the racism in the United States, just remember we have 2 borders. Or undocumented people come from Canada. They come from Canada just as much as probably they come from the South. Probably more so, because they know that Border Patrol isn't nearly as tight up there as it is down south. And there's a reason for that. Racism.
More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any other country. I want to use it. I want to use what we have. I want to bring down prices, bring down costs, and I also have to stop the invasion. And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking
There's a
your jobs.
reason why he uses that word.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
So, actually, that's really good that we're off that topic.